legacy started when we discovered the opportunity to build the country for the next generation. And we began safety, knowledge, technologies, innovation. Now the question is, what can we bring to the entire world? The future. Welcome to the Future Innovation Summit.
Hi, you got a minute for your career? Finding a good executive management or supervisory job in today's market is tough. The lingering impact of COVID-19, industry consolidation, plus significant changes in how the job markets actually work is confounding to thousands of job seekers. One of the primary reasons these job seekers struggle is because they do not set goals for their performance, doing what it takes every day, every week, every month to find that next better job. Someone said that goals are dreams with deadlines. I like that. In 1987, a struggling actor sat down and wrote himself a $10 million check. He post-dated it for Thanksgiving Day, 1995. In 1994, that actor, Jim Carrey, earned $10 million for Dumb and Dumber. Setting goals is really important. It's a way to hold yourself accountable.
Good afternoon, good morning, depending upon what part of the world you're in. If it's Friday, it is the CEO series. And I'm so excited today to have a good friend of mine, Azad Navaz, who's the head of qualification and retail HR for BMW. His hobby, helping his father fix a family car, inspired a career in the automotive industry, and he eventually became an automotive engineer. He heads up the BMW Global Training and People Development in the retail sector, covering about 37 countries. So thank you so much for being here, and I love your background. Give us some feedback on your background of the park.
Hey, Ron, thank you very much for having me today on your show. It's a great honor to be a part of your show. Yes, just to let you know that I'm currently sitting in the heart of London, and I am actually doing one of the things which most families do at some point in their life, is actually offloading my two children at university. So I've got an 18-year-old and a 20-year-old, and they are starting university this month. So as a good parent, loading the car with all the usual bits and pieces and saying goodbye to them for the next part of their life. So yeah, that's what I'm doing here. But it's a fantastic day here in London, I have to say.
Yeah, it looks beautiful. It looks beautiful. So give us some background. You know, I've always been curious, and we've kind of talked on this before, that, you know, the first time we met as an automotive engineer, how did you transition into the people development HR side? How did that transition happen?
Well, okay, the story starts off. My father always wanted me to be a motor mechanic and to work on cars as an engineer. So I went on to go into engineering, but starting off as a motor vehicle technician repairing cars in a dealership. It was a Vauxhall Citroen dealership here in the UK. That's where I originated from. But I learned very, very quickly that I wanted to be able to tell people what was wrong with their cars. So I stepped out of the dealership and I got a job working for a breakdown recovery company called the AA in the UK. Okay. And that's where I learned very, very quickly that not only do I love cars, but I love people. And more importantly, I love helping people. And that's how I switched into the HR side, from the automotive engineering side, on helping people, stranded motorists on the roadside.
So that's kind of the equivalent of AAA in US, kind of the same.
Absolutely, yes, that's right. We call it the AA
Okay.
in
AA.
the
You
UK.
lost.
Yeah,
You lost one A. Right.
we lost one of them. Yes, not Alcoholics Anonymous. Don't get confused with that. The Automobile Association. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So that was a major transition. So did you, as you moved into from AA side, that kind of was the foundation of building into the current position you're in now?
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean, quite of a journey.
yeah, it is. I mean, what actually happened was I very quickly learned my talent, was with people, supporting people, helping people in difficult situations. And what happened after that was that I worked for the AA for a period of time, 3 or 4 years, and then I moved into becoming an automotive lecturer, teaching at a university, undergraduates in automotive engineering. So, yes, it's the people business, the people development side of things, and
Hmm.
more importantly, helping people to further their career, and that's it. And then one day, I joined the Rover Group as a trainer, and that
Okay.
was my step back into the automotive industry. So yeah, a very
So,
interesting time.
yeah, because we were talking a while ago, and you told me that your current employee, you've been there like 29 years, is it? 20?
Yeah, yeah, it's 22 years actually, not
22
quite
years.
20,
Okay.
22 years. Yeah, I work for the BMW Group, and I'm basically responsible for the people development, and what's perhaps most important than anything else is it's looking at not just training and qualification, but looking at how can we make our colleagues feel belonged within the organization to be
Okay.
able to churn out a really good quality work. I'm responsible for 37 countries,
I see. Yeah.
across North Africa and Eastern Europe, and
Mm,
I have to say to you, it's very much more along making sure that we've got the right people on board, we develop
yeah.
them, and we keep them. That's
Mm,
very important.
okay. So that's that. It's called now the employee journey. From candidate
Yes.
to exit,
Yes.
wherever that is, even if it's not 22 years. That's kind of that's a huge opportunity to build culture, to develop leaders. What are some key things that you've noticed, say post COVID, as it relates to developing leaders inside of organization?
Okay. Well, we know that when it comes to the COVID situation has really caused us to all pretty much go online. We haven't had any kind of real face-to-face interaction with colleagues, and what that's meant, particularly for our leaders and managers around, is that we need to effectively communicate and look at ways of making people feel comfortable in different learning or different uh, environments. Um, so, yeah, what's actually happened is that our leaders now in the organization are looking at seeing how we can effectively communicate and bring across the message and reassure our people that things are going to be good. I personally don't believe that there is any one way to handle an
Yeah.
employee in an organization.
Yeah.
There's so many different ways,
Yeah.
and the leaders and management teams are looking at ways of making sure that we effectively communicate and lead and manage our people in the right ways.
Mm,
Um, yeah, it is a challenge, and it's also very important to take into consideration the different cultures of the people who we're working with, because as I said to you earlier, I'm responsible for some 37 countries, and some of those markets are we have to adjust according to the way in
mm,
which they would
mm.
like to be communicated and led.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that because that was a big learning for me when I left the U.S. to come to Saudi Arabia. Because American people, and I can say this, they tend to think their model is the best one. In other words, what we do, what we design, this is it, and we expect entities across to adapt to that. And that was one of the things I found out that would not work. You have to get input from each one of those sectors as in geographical regions, because as you just said, people react differently in certain cultures.
Absolutely right. Yes, and you don't need to go very far across the globe to see a difference in how people receive information. Um, and I basically build from my training and people development programs. We basically look at two areas. We look at the rationality of a person in terms of their personality and their emotional side, and we look at very carefully to say, for example, if a market or if a person, let's drill down to a person, for example, tends to be more emotional, we need to adapt our communication style accordingly to
Hmm.
fit the person and the culture of the market, or things can be misunderstood. And that's where
Hmm.
things go wrong. So a simple thing like, how many cars have you sold, in a friendly way, that could that could be received in a completely different way depending on who you're communicating with. Yes,
Yeah,
and of course you can mean it with the best intention.
yeah.
So yes, it's very important to bear that in mind, especially the countries, the places and people who we're dealing with, and take into consideration culture.
Hmm. Hmm. So you're so correct about that, because what was just stated in a casual conversation could take on a totally different meaning depending upon which culture you're in. So one of my clients was telling me the transition they made from insurance agents knocking door to door selling insurance products, and when it went to COVID, and now there was a social side, there was a technology side in doing that. A lot of their people whose average age was a little higher had a tough time transitioning.
Yes, I can imagine that. I can really imagine that. I mean, I'm a Generation X, as they would describe nowadays.
Hmm.
So I'm a little old school. I've got, as I mentioned to you right at the very beginning of our discussion, I've got two kids which are going into university. They're both Generation Zs.
Yeah.
They got their nose plastered on their iPhones and devices and stuff like this all the time. So they can assimilate and join into these type of online digital communications very, very easily. But one of the challenges which I don't think a lot of us are faced with is the older generations, a bit like me. Um, it can be quite difficult
Yeah.
to build up a rapport or relationship online, and
Mm.
then you got the culture element as well. So yeah, it's always good to have a face to face wherever you can. I think that helps to build a relationship. But relationships are one of the most important things in any kind of leadership or management
Mm.
of any type of person, is to build
Mm.
trust, build up a strong trust, clear, good communication, and making sure that we don't misunderstand each other. Um, and body language, unfortunately, you can see me here in a wonderful park or behind me here, but you're only just seeing my face, you're seeing my facial expressions, and you're hearing me,
Yeah.
but you're
Yeah.
not physically there. Yes, you can
Yeah.
imagine if you were here, we'll have a completely different relationship, I guess. So
Exactly.
yeah, it's very important to try and bring that across somehow. It's not so easy.
Yeah. Yeah. Because face to face, you're picking up, as I was telling you, my first session post COVID was a leadership development project, and it felt so good being in the room because I could see someone thinking about something. I mentioned something, and they were thinking about it. I could see someone else writing something down. You miss all of that online, and
Absolutely.
and I'm able to take those kind of inflections and build them into my next stream of consciousness or whatever it is of having a conversation, and all of that's missing.
Yes. Well, having said that, we were talking to one of our suppliers the other day, and we were talking about AI in recruitment.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, it sounds like, what? How can you get a robot to recruit me? It sounds
Yeah.
really strange,
Yeah.
because recruitment is a very personal thing. And normally you say, "Look, show me the guy, and I like to meet the person and then decide."
Yeah.
But the way the things are going in the future, it is going to be very much that way. I do believe that,
Yeah.
looking at facial expressions, the types of words in which you're using, How often do you use those type of words? And those are the kind of things which will trigger off an algorithm and then decide, are we saying the right things? Are we doing the right things in terms of our communication style? And how can we improve? So digital technology, for sure, is going to help us in the future.
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to be an additional aid that we will have as opposed to using that as the mainstream. The same reason I don't think assessments should be the final determinant, because that kind of gives us a starting point and we can take it from there. But there was a very famous case study that was done by one of your competitors back in 2015, the recruiting car. And if you go online and you search that on YouTube, they use cars. Volvo used cars to recruit engineers. And and one of the things they said, there was an unbiased initial interview.
Yes.
So nothing was taken into the way that we as people would look at the way a person is dressed or whatever it was. And it was a very insightful, and this was 2015. So you can imagine where we are now as it relates to that.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, an unbiased interview nowadays, there's so many different ways. I mean, in my region, when we're looking at recruitment, we also look at things like, for example, we have interview panels where we not only have one person who's on board, but we got different people from different backgrounds and different, somebody's local, somebody from head office, to try and get a different perspective and be as fair as you possibly can when it comes to recruiting. Yeah, but the robots are around. The robots.
Yeah, and you know what? As I said, it's already out of the bag, so you're not going to put it back in the bag. So you got to figure out how it's going to work, as it relates to that. So, one of the key, in looking through your bio, and this was right after Prince Philip had died.
Oh yes.
And I noticed that you had received the personal gold medal from Prince Philip. What was that about? I mean, wow, you're talking about an accolade.
Yeah, well, it actually starts from my father passed away some 30 years ago, and he was always wanting me to be an engineer. And I actually left school. I was an absolute dropout, to be honest with you. I messing around in school, didn't do anything. Actually left school with nothing. Just an O level, we call them in the UK, in art and biology. And then for some reason, I decided to kind of really pull my finger out and start working really hard. And I wanted to kind of fulfill what my father wanted me to do. So to become an engineer. And that was it, basically. I traveled the world. I backpacked around the world for some 3 years, 1,000
I saw that,
1,000 days, 1,000 days through some 25 different countries. And I came back to the UK looking to see, well, you know what can I do now? I'd like to be a lecturer. And the university said to me, well, you have to go to university and have a degree. Anyway, cut a long story short. I did completed an engineering degree in occupant safety. I'm actually an engineer by profession, believe it or not. People developer, but I'm actually an engineer by profession, specializing in interior protection of motor vehicles. So if a car has a crash, how can we make it safer for people inside those cars? And I developed and designed a piece of equipment which is actually used in the US for the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards, the FMVSS standards in the US. To try and design cars to make them safer. And that piece of equipment which I designed actually got some awards.
Really?
Yes, back in 1995, those years ago. And my university submitted my thesis to the Buckingham Palace, which Prince Philip is the patron of the City and Guilds Institute. And he chose me personally back in 1998. And I had the wonderful pleasure of going to Buckingham Palace and receiving a gold medal personally from him. And it was quite sad when he passed away, because I've actually met the man myself. And he's a very friendly man, a down-to-earth guy, and he drives a Land Rover.
You
did drive a Land Rover.
He did drive a Land Rover. But I read that when he died, he designed the Land Rover to carry him as a casket.
Yes.
I don't know whether that was...
Absolutely true. You know what? He knows so much. One of the questions he asked me when he actually handed over the medal to me at Buckingham Palace back in 1998, that time. Yes, he actually said to me, "You know what? I keep locking my keys in my car. How do you get into a Land Rover, a Range Rover Classic?" So he was a really down to earth. I had lunch with him, and he was
Oh,
just a really
really?
really down to earth guy, really nice guy.
Wow,
Such a
wow.
sad loss,
Yeah,
really.
yeah. Were your parents able to come there for you to receive that award?
Yes, indeed.
Oh, I
They
can only imagine.
Yes, right. They all turned up at the ceremony with my wife and my family. Yeah, a day to remember. Absolutely.
Mm,
And that was the start. And from then, you know, I I just want to give other people the opportunity, certainly within my company, to be able to achieve as best they possibly can. I was given the chance once upon a time in my career, and I think
okay.
everyone else should be. And I think it's all about giving people opportunities to be able to climb up high, show people the direction,
Mm-hmm.
and let people. And you know what? I think it's not so much about pushing people into something which they don't like. I think the thing nowadays is when you look at a career, it's all about letting people excel and go down the road they like, what they want to
Mm-hmm.
do, and where
Mm-hmm.
they want to go, and build on their
Mm-hmm.
strengths rather
Yeah.
than trying to be someone who they're not.
Okay. So that brings me to a point. Career ladder or career lattice. So I'm thinking you're kind of a lattice guy,
Well, yeah,
or
career when you, yeah. I mean, I think we talk about and nowadays, the career ladder when as we know it in the past, it used to be like you need to plan your life out, right? In the
yeah,
olden days,
yeah,
you need to sit down with your parents, and your parents say you're going to be a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer, and that's it. Anyway, certainly from my Asian background, it's like that. It's
yeah.
they're very much career oriented. But today, I think it's more about people are looking at stopping and changing and finding their way. So I think
Mm.
there's less planning in today's younger generation.
Okay, you're freezing.
Our legacy started when we discovered the opportunity to build the country for the next generation. And we began safety, knowledge, technologies, innovation. Now the question is, what can we bring to the entire world? The future. Welcome to the Future Innovation Summit. Our legacy started when we discovered the opportunity to build the country for the next generation. And we began safety, knowledge, technologies, innovation. Now the question is, what can we bring to the entire world? The future. Welcome to the Future Innovation Summit.
Okay, we're back. Hey, we made it back.
So sorry
So
about that.
we were just talking. We were just talking about technology, right? And
Yes.
how all these things go about. Yeah. So, Ade, thank you for being able to switch that up to those commercials. So that was great. So, welcome back for part two. You know what? I'm intrigued by starting at university and not doing well, pulling out, trying to find yourself, and you go on this 3 year kind of traveling around to get a sense of the next step, and was able to go back and complete that degree and start from there, and all of the things that you've done since then. Would you advise people, because I know lots of times I read stories about someone that's graduated from high school and they'll take a year off to try to get a sense of what it's about, as opposed to going straight in, with the pressures of that. So give us some thoughts in the context of the 3 years that you took to kind of travel the world.
Okay. Well, I think traveling is one of the most important things anyone can do.
Yeah.
Being a people person, the more people you can meet, I personally believe, the wider you become in terms of your horizons, and the wider you can become in terms of a person. You can adapt and assimilate to different types of people from across the globe. Um, So I would strongly recommend traveling and or backpacking. It depends on how you like to do it. I
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
recommend it very strongly. I have to say to you that the 3 years which I took out, which was just over 1,000 days, I was traveling around the world, gave me a completely different perspective on my intercultural expertise, dealing with different
Okay.
types of people. So that kind of gave me some kind of grounding. It gave me time to decide on what I
Yeah.
really, really like to do.
Mm.
And I have to say to you, had I not traveled and met so many different types of people from all different cultures and walks of life, I don't think I would have really got into the people business.
I know. I know.
Yes.
And that was that was an added benefit of that. Whereas you didn't see that as a benefit of doing it for another reason, but that was one of the offshoots of it.
Absolutely. Whenever I meet people from all different parts of the world now, I can understand and assimilate with them. Um, yeah, and that definitely played a very important role on my career
Uh-huh.
and
Uh-huh.
shaping my career. And who knows, maybe I would still be a vehicle technician had I not traveled the world. Because it's only when I returned I really kind of switched into the people side of things.
Well, do you think the 1,000 days caused you to have more of a laser focus? A lot of times, they always say about kids bright-eyed and they're looking at everything in the world in this dreamy kind of film way. And because you've got the laser focus of seeing all these things happen.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think I know a lot. I'm a mentor for a lot of university students even today,
Mm,
and I always often ask the question: so, where would you like to see yourself go, and what would you like to see yourself do in the future?
yeah,
And a lot of them come back to me and say, "I'd like to be a manager." I said, "Yeah, great, fantastic. You'd like to be a manager? I'd like to be a leader. I'd like to be a boss."
yeah,
And I say to them, "Well, you know what? Yeah, it's all very good being a boss and being a manager or being a leader of a big organization, but you need to start off really slow. You need to walk before you can run, kind of thing.
mm,
Um,
hmm,
and and I always recommend that let people find their own way. It doesn't matter what you do, but as long as you enjoy it, take your
yeah,
time, no rush, because one day you'll find something which you really love, and what you love, build on it. And all I will say is that for those people which are looking at a career now, is never stop. If you're going to become, I don't know, a gardener, make sure you're the best gardener and do all the
yeah,
best possible things about that. So
yeah,
always try and excel in whatever you do. So,
mm,
but most important is find what you really, really like. And that's
mm,
the most important thing. And walk before you can run. I'm a believer in that.
yeah. Well, at one time I was in the engagement business as I was the CEO for a great place to work here in in the Middle East, and I've often said, and there was a book that came out after a few years ago which kind of said the same thing. If organizations or people in organizations were really doing what they really, really enjoyed, you'd have high engagement. But a lot of people in those lower 1, 2, 3 rating categories, they don't know what they want to do. They don't, and this is just my own interpretation, they haven't found themselves yet. They haven't done the 1,000-mile journey, I'm using it as a metaphor, to figure out this is what I want to do.
Yes, and a lot of it's to do with the environment in which you're placed in as well.
Yeah.
So the more exposure you get, I'm a great believer that you are the average of the 5 people you most interact with. So if you're stuck in a room all by yourself and you're not getting out about, or if you're inspired by people, I mean, today the world is packed full of influencers, and people which are online. And a lot of the youngsters today are looking at these so-called, these video clips, these Instagram clips, and all these type of things which are all around, which are great, which is fantastic. But in reality, some of them are quite far away from doing a real job. And of course, sometimes I do believe that we tend to lead a little bit of a fake life, and the internet's kind of steering us a little bit into that. But most important is whatever you do is that you're happy and you're content in it. That's the most important thing.
I just finished reading an article last night or the night before on a white paper concerning the influence of Instagram with teenagers, the influence of social media, and through the prism of, all of my friends are living great lives and I'm not doing anything. Whereas you just said that's a facade as to what you see. So I'll take that one step further. When we look at organizations, when people say, oh my God, I'd want to work for BMW, I'd want to work for Mercedes, I'd want to work for Louis Vuitton. You may get there and it's totally different from that because you're buying in from the external view.
Absolutely. And I think, of course, there's a certain amount of self-satisfaction working for a big organization. And for me, working for the big BMW Group car company, it's such a great company to work for. In that, I feel proud about it. Yes. So you obviously need to feel proud, but I think the most important thing is don't expect too much from anybody or any job. It's just really just take on what you do and find what you do and make it enjoyable for yourself. Yes. There's always the rough which comes with the smooth, if you know what I mean. And there are people which I know they just expect a lot from I've got a degree and I've got a master's and I've got this and I've got that and I expect to earn lots of money and I expect to be a leader and all of that kind of stuff. But you know what? I think at the end of the day, it's good to expect that. But most important is to be content within yourself, and even if it's a simple job you're doing, just be happy that that you got it, and then we always strive to be better. Always.
Well, that comes back to what you just said: crawl before you walk. Because you've got an MBA, because you've got I see people say, I've got a master's degree, I'm looking to do something now. I've got an MBA, and my thing is, you and 10,000 others have the same degree. What are you offering beyond that? And what are you looking for?
Absolutely. And I tell a lot of my mentees who I do a lot of mentoring for, and they say, hey, Azad, I'm looking at getting a job. I'm looking at can you give me some advice on what I should do and what I should say during an interview for this company I'm wishing to join? Could you have a look at my CV and make sure it's all clearly read out and laid out in the right way with a cover letter which is looking good? So I'll look through their CV and I'll look through their cover letter and I'll give them all the best advice I possibly can. But I will say to them, and I'll say to them every time the same words, what most companies are looking for is they're looking for attitude, they're looking for behavior, they're looking to see what are you able to bring to the table in this company. You may have the best master's degree and you may have the best qualifications in the world with 70 years of experience sitting behind you. But at the end of the day, if you're not able to work together with people and communicate effectively and assimilate with different types of people and bring value to the organization, and willingness to learn is such an important thing. So, you come into an organization, and you may be new, but adapting and assimilating and working together and collaborating and co-creating and coming together to find a common solution. And that's what companies are looking for today. They're looking very much at that. How do you fit into my organization? What added value can you bring to us? What's your willingness to learn and fit in with our team?
Yeah.
So that's the key skill.
Yeah. I was in Hong Kong during the rebellion, and the hotel I was in, I had a front row seat to see throughout the day as we were having this session, and the kids were throwing things, and then the people were shooting this bullets and the tear gas. But I'm looking at it through a totally different lens. And these were all leaders, or these were all senior HR leaders in the room. And we were watching that. I said, let's do a case study. Let's do a breakout exercise on this. I said, imagine 5 years from now, you're interviewing these people. These people did not lay in the bed this morning and watch it on TV. They got involved and they came out and did something. This is the future leaders of every organization in Hong Kong in the next 10, 15 years. So if you were to interview one of these leaders, if you had to interview these people, what questions would you ask them? I said, because they've shown that they're ready to stand up and say what may not be appropriate, but they're trying to make change. How would you handle that in your organization? What is the culture? We had the greatest session. We just took the books we had and put them away, and we did like a 2-hour session just on that piece because it was that important. Because the same way you said that you're mentoring a lot of the leaders coming up and you're giving them this advice, in 10 years, 5 years, whatever it is, they will be leading in some organization. They will be mentoring people the same way that you are now.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what we're looking for, and it's not just within the BMW group, but across all big multi-organizations, as you quite rightly say, it's co-creation, collaboration, working across different people, different personalities. And, if something is not working, fail it and start something new. And throw that piece of paper away and start sketching something new. And having a positive energy, positive attitude in everything we do. And I think that's what a lot of organizations are looking for nowadays. And I don't know how true this is, but I do remember that there are some companies which don't even look at a degree. So they'll take you on board, big organizations, and they say degree not required to come and join our big organization. But more importantly is, what are you able to bring to our organization?
Yes.
How can we work with our people?
I read an article that game developers, the vast majority of game developers, I don't know the percentage, very high percentage, are not degreed. They got into gaming at a younger age and learned to program and do all these things and understand the underpinnings of games. And they're gamers, they're game designers. And I think exactly what you just said, that's what's coming up. This is the next step.
Absolutely. We're looking for people which are pragmatic in the organization. Gone are the days as the guys sat in a small little room who was the managing director, wearing a suit and a white shirt and a tie, and he's like leading the organization from his room. Today, our leaders are wearing polo shirts, trousers. They are practical. They're on the workshop floor. They're milling around their people. Leadership and management is very much different to what it used to be in the olden days. Very much pragmatic today in big organizations. Consultative, the autocratic way of leadership style. It's kind of it's not so popular nowadays.
So I follow the discussion. So here's how the generational gap comes in. So I follow a lot of threads on Facebook and LinkedIn and in the HR space and leadership. And one gentleman, I posted an article about looking for qualifications. If a person has had 3 or 4 jobs in, say, 8 years, that may be looked upon as a negative versus the other one wanting long-term. And then a gentleman opened up his comment with, that's the new kids' way of thinking. And I'm like, oh my God, you did not say that. kids. And he used all of these kind of terms, which is really a negative in trying to make his point. So I commented, I said, kids, question mark, and the relationship with your boss, question mark. I said, try and change your level of conversation because this is not appropriate today. So let's
Yeah,
talk
it's
about
true.
that. So how do you bring the new leader has been identified? You've watched things that they're doing, and you know or you feel this is leadership material. How should organizations begin to move forward to maybe begin having the conversation to see whether they want to be in that pool of development?
Yeah. Well, I mean, regular, evaluation, employee evaluation is very, very important, and managers and leaders need to be having regular communication with their people. That's clear, and that's basics. And the days are gone where you would work for an organization for 30 years. I'm
Mm.
one of the last few. I mean, you asked me, how long have I been with the company? I said, I told you over 20 years. But
Yeah.
you know what? The way things are going today, it's very, very different. The younger
Hmm.
generation, the Generation Zs, like my kids, which are starting university, it's
Yeah.
quite common for them to change companies a number of times, getting experiences, starting off with a startup company, for example, and getting some experience, and then and stepping across into a big organization, a corporate organization, and then
Yeah.
stepping back into another startup company, and just
Hmm.
moving around. And this is quite normal today for the younger generation and the next generation, let's call it.
Hmm.
So yes, so our leaders need to all the time quiz their employees and the people which are working in their teams. What do you like doing most? Where do you see yourself going
Hmm.
in the next 5 years? What can we do to support your development?
Yeah. Hmm.
Are you happy with what you're doing? And you know what? If you're staying in a department for more than 5 years nowadays, it's kind of too long. You have to kind of think about
Yeah.
what's your
Yeah.
value and how you develop. Some people, don't get me wrong, like it. Some people are
Hmm.
very happy to stay until they retire.
Yeah.
But on the other side, there are people which nowadays are all the time moving, which is quite normal,
Yeah.
absolutely normal.
Yeah. I saw a post the other day, no, relating to people staying on teams. Intuit, the software developer, they had their analytics team look at team performance. And one of the key drivers was that if a person stayed with the team 5 years plus, if that team stayed together, the performance of that team would drop. So
Yes, I
what
can
they
believe that.
started to do was at the 4 year point was reinvigorating each team, reconstructing the team, bringing in new talent, new people looking at things a different way than the other people that developed. And they realized as an offshoot, the performance of the team increased.
Yeah, absolutely. Bringing in new talent is a really, really important thing. What I can tell you, in my organization, we are customer facing, as we all know. Driving a BMW, we want to give our customers
Yeah.
the best experience. So the hospitality industry is something which we look at very closely. In every
Oh,
one of our BMW dealers, we have what's called a genius, one of these guys, which are making sure that our customers are are satisfied. But you know what? We're starting to look for people not only within the automotive industry, but we're looking for people which are coming from outside, from the hospitality industry, the airline industry,
yeah.
the hotel industry. Because you know what? As long as they love working with our products and they have the right attitude and they're good at dealing with people, yeah, let's bring them in. You know, we don't need 30 years of experience of automotive engineering for someone dealing with a customer. So we want
Mm,
people which are more customer
mm,
focused,
mm.
people which are coming from the hospitality business. So we're reaching out to those people in our adverts, and very
So the skill,
successfully too.
yeah. So the skill set from customer service can still apply in another industry because the skill is what you're looking for. The skill is transferable.
Absolutely right. I mean, the human interaction and dealing with people is so important. That's
Yes.
the most important part. Knowing about cars and all those things you can learn. That's logical stuff. But
Yeah.
it's the real people part. And you know what? People working in hotel businesses are dealing with customers all the time. Customer
Exactly.
expectations are right up high. And people
Exactly.
working in the airline industry, absolutely the same. So,
Mhm.
why do we need to recreate the wheel when there are people out there which are naturally inclined to dealing with customers already, which are coming from the hospitality business? So, yeah, reach out to
Yeah.
different businesses. We don't need to stick in our same old way.
Mm,
Be
mm,
flexible.
mm.
Absolutely.
So that's a totally different mindset from corporate past. I've been out of corporate a while, so I'm just reflecting on the time because you'd see it. I give you an example. I saw a job posting here in Dubai. They were looking for a certain sector of engineer, and they said must have 20 years experience. And then when I read through the description, they said we want innovative, out of the box thinkers, innovative approach, and all these kinds of things. And I'm saying, but you're saying somebody that's been doing the same thing for 20 years, hoping that that'll transition to something else.
Hmm.
So my comment was kind of snarky, but I said 20 years experience and you want innovation. Not that I'm saying the 20-year person is going to bring about this, but kind of like you looked at the hospitality to bring it into the automotive, and they said, why are you doing it this way? Everybody else is doing it this way to create the experience.
That's a really, really interesting point you pointed out there. Let me relate to your story very briefly about an interview. I do many interviews within the BMW group, but I did an interview once, and we had this guy which came in. I was actually sitting by. I was observing the recruitment process, and the guy was applying for a job, and he claimed that he had 20 years of experience in the automotive segment. So we sat him down. He was applying for a leadership position. We sat him down and he was like explaining. So I said, wow, 20 years of experience. That's fantastic. So could you tell us a little bit about your first 2 years? What did you do? And he explained exactly what he did. And I said, well, what did you do in the next 2 years? And he said, well, pretty much the same in the first 2 years. And I said, well, what about the next 2 years? And he kind of explained pretty much the same in the last 2 years. So I said, well, what did you bring new to the table in the last 20 years in the organization? Well, he said, well, I did this. So, well, if I calculate it, you actually haven't got 20 years of experience. You've got 2 years of
And
experience
18 years
of
of doing
repeating the
this.
same thing year in, year out. So leadership is all about change. It's about bringing things
Yeah.
new to the table and making things, and adding value to the organization. So, I mean, I can understand that sometimes you do have to repeat a process and you repeat things the same. But what did you try and change, or what did you try and bring forward? What differences did you bring to your organization? Yeah, so
Mm.
these 20-year-old experienced guys, you've got to watch out for them a little bit, because in most cases,
Yeah.
only bring
Yeah.
2 years.
Yeah. So it's 2 years of actual doing the job and 18 years of duplicating the same thing over and over again.
That's right, Ron.
Yeah. So when I made the comment on the guy said, yeah, but well, we want experienced people. I said, no argument with me. You placed the ad. I'm just saying, think about what you're asking for. You're asking for 20 years experience, but you want all these cool things to happen. That may not come from the 20-year in one position mindset or the career in moving up.
Absolutely. We want people
Yeah.
which are bringing new things to the table. Okay, maybe they don't work. Fine.
Yeah.
Fine,
Yeah.
no problem. Not every action, every idea, every plan of project works. But tell us what you are bringing to the table. What were your ideas? What were your changes? What value did you bring in those 20 years of experience? So invariably it's not.
It's not. It's not. As we begin to close out, as you spend some time with your mentees, as a mentor over the years, give us three key pieces of advice for young people starting out. Because as you
Oh,
just said, in starting up with the show, you've got 2 kids you're dropping off. What advice would you give people getting getting your kids 4 years from now as they're trying to understand this whole thing about corporate or startup or whatever it is?
okay, that's a good one. You've really put me on the spot, because I've got 2 kids, which which I actually, and I do advise them the best I possibly can. I don't push my kids, and I think the most important thing is to let people find their own way.
Okay.
Yes, but you know what? They need to find what they like, find their passion. That's my advice. Okay. look at the positive things in what you do. Yeah, I always say to my kids as well, and I say to all my mentees, and I have regular discussions with them, and I say to them, look, you know, the job which you're going for, or your career in which you're starting for, you're going to have to accept the rough with the smooth. It ain't going to be a sweet sailing journey all the way. I can tell you that for nothing. Yes, and you're not going to be sitting in that manager position driving your fancy car, you know, in your manager's room, and that's not going to happen straight away. So you're going to have to take things. So I say, find what you really like, start slow, yes. But I would suggest one important thing, which is really important, is communication. I think to have a good communication skill is something which is essential in anyone, because whatever job you do, be it a doctor, be it a lawyer, be it a trainer, whoever you are, you can be the best doctor in the world, but if you're not able to communicate effectively with your patients, or the best engineer, and if you can't talk and bring things, or a marketing guy, if you can't bring things onto the boardroom table in a nice, energetic, convincing way, then you know what? It's a shame, because all your skill and talent's wasted. So I would recommend that to focus on good communication with people, who be it your wife, your children, your parents, whoever you're talking to. Make sure that people understand clearly what you're talking about, and be clear. Because a lot of misunderstandings where things go wrong, even with your parents and your wife or whoever you're talking to, you know, you say something and people hear things in a different way. So I do really recommend for the younger generations to focus more on what they enjoy and be clear about who they're talking to, what you expect from each other. And that skill of good communication is what's going to take them wherever they want to go. Believe me. Yes.
Especially in so it's cool, because especially in the global context, like all the countries that you said that you're in charge of, that communication skills is important. So that takes me to one other point I want to make before we close out, is storytelling. So the storytelling is being able to accomplish all of those. That's the kind of the new word that's being talked about now, storytelling.
Absolutely right. People nowadays, they don't want to listen to a lecture standing in a university, boring. They want to be entertained. And you know what? The best way to communicate is to actually relate it to a story, because people remember stories and they relate to stories, and make it pragmatic as possible. So storytelling is an absolute fantastic skill to have, and relate it in a very friendly and open way, and making sure that the audience who's listening to that story are all tuned in and they've got their eyes open and they're listening. Wow, really? Is that how it happened? And something which is memorable. But I really think storytelling is a fantastic way, and if not the best way, a memorable way to bring a message across. People remember it.
I did a group last week out of Singapore, and that question came up about storytelling, and the person was saying that I am just not good at standing up, doing, making that conversation. I said, is anyone on your team that has those skills? So you can always get up and do the intro and let the storyteller get up and play their role. Don't feel and you hear me out on this, don't feel as if you're a leader. You have to master all of these, because it's about collaboration.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Collaboration. So you use the skill set in your team. So you will definitely have someone who's very good with the voice, who really enjoys standing up on stage. Yes, and saying what he has to say. Yes. So let that person be your mouthpiece for one time, and then you step in at the right time, and you can talk. So use your team, collaborate effectively, use your skills in your team to bring the message across. CEOs of big organizations, often, you see them as these so-called influencers. They are people which are, they call them, they're looking very closely at trying to make an impact on their organization. And maybe they're not very good, especially these small startup companies. They're not very good at standing in front of an organization and talking about their group. So bring someone else forward, yes, and co-present together with that person. Let that person take the lead, yes, and bring a dialogue together. I know
So
that happens a
basically,
lot.
yeah. So basically, building that team around the strengths of the individuals that's sitting in that room, and everybody plays a key role in driving that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think one important thing is authenticity,
Mm.
because as a leader, you need to make sure that you're authentic. Yes, you need to be authentic. You need to come across as sincere
Yeah.
and believing. So whatever message you communicate, I mean, you can tell stories, yes, but be authentic with your stories. Be
Yeah.
authentic in your communication. Be
Yeah.
yourself. If you're the person which is all the time wearing a leather jacket, be it. That's your brand. That's you. That's how you talk. If you're the
Yeah.
person which is all the time cracking a joke, it's you. Bring
Yeah.
that forward. And I think so. That's about being authentic. So it's most
Yeah.
important. It's about being yourself, being true to yourself, and using the people around you in your
Hmm.
team
Yeah.
to support you in your organization.
Mm. Okay, cool. Azad, thank you so much for taking the time. Your beautiful day in London, taking time away for your kids. Tell your kids I apologize to them for getting their father away, but thank you for sharing insights. So just hang on a minute as we close out. And I want you to tell everybody in Europe next week, 29th, I said hello. I can't come this time, but tell everybody I said hello, and I'll see you next time around. So just hang on for a second as we close out.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you.
First